I pressed it.
Good job.
Oh, we haven't started recording yet.
Ooh.
We are live. What's up,
Hi.
everybody?
Wow.
I pressed the button to go live just to realize that we haven't started recording or doing anything.
Who are you?
Sorry.
Where am I?
But everyone can just hang out with us while we set up this show. We haven't done this in a while, so getting our feet wet once again. Recording hockey podcast. Shams is here though, and Andy. So they'll help us get on track here. Brian, you want to count us in for the recording? Have you tested your Audacity and everything? I normally ask you off them. You want to maybe record yourself, listen back? I don't know what your process is.
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, record.
Oh, it didn't work. Sorry. I pressed the button and it didn't. Okay, do it again. Do it again, please.
Because that's karma for 3, 2, 1, record.
Recording. Okay, and then this one, record to the computer. Recording in progress. That's what Zoom told me.
Love that.
Did Zoom tell you that also?
Always.
Yeah,
Zoom's just looking out for me. Zoom cares.
They don't want you to know that. They don't want me to be recording without your knowledge.
Yeah, even though it might be legal.
I mean,
it depends on where you're at. Some provinces instead. I don't actually know the rules in Canada.
I mean, but a lot of things are legal but unethical. And we like to step above just being legal. We want to do things the right way.
We do. We are very ethically focused.
We should even let the chat know your comments that you're writing in the chat are being recorded, just so you know. If people go back and rewatch the YouTube video, I believe they see the full chat transcript as they go. So I just want you to know that you're being recorded also. We all are. Also, I have a Google Home in this room. That's always recording me, probably.
Definitely.
So, yeah. All right, but now that we're all on the same page, I guess we can start the show.
You pay for that privilege.
Yeah, I pay to be recorded. Okay. Let's do it. Let's see how we go.
He's not confirmed.
Okay, so we'll just say in the show, not confirmed.
But it seems likely.
Okay.
Do you know
do it? Oh, yes. No, of course, please. We have lots of time.
No.
I'm an ass.
You are an ass.
I don't even want to be an ass. I don't know. It just comes out of me. It's this is my persona. It's not how I am in real life.
Yeah, well.
All right. So what did you want to say?
Nothing. I'm good.
Well, no, just say it. What? Something about Max Domi?
I have nothing to say.
Ty Domi was on the Leafs once, and now Max Domi will be on the Leafs. Is that a good take?
Is that a take? Is
that a thing that might get shown on every Leafs game broadcast? We'll have Ty Domi in the crowd cheering.
Oh my god,
Max Domi.
I feel wasn't Ty Domi mad at the Leafs? Doesn't he have some beef with the franchise?
Oh, I don't know. He has a grievance.
Things soured.
I don't know.
They didn't draft his son.
Well,
he played his heart out for all those years, every night.
We've actually been
they didn't even draft his son.
We've been a big Domi boosting podcast for a while. We would talk about how he's good and
in Arizona,
any year he's gonna break out. And then he got traded to where was it? Montreal. And then he had that good year. Though that actually was you know what it was? It was once he had that good year, that's when you soured on him. As soon as he hit 70 points or whatever, then you were he can't do it again. It's not going to happen.
It's cool.
He
for
overperformed.
Me to say it's hip for me to say it before he does it, and then once he does it, then I can start. And then I was right about that too.
Yeah, you were right that he was good up until he was good, and then you said he sucked, and then you were right that he sucked.
I've been wow.
So what do you think about him now? Is he good or does he suck? We'll save it for the show, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know that this is his fifth team since the start of 2 seasons ago?
Oh, since 2 seasons ago. That's funny. Taylor Hall's also been on a lot of teams recently.
Yeah.
All right.
There's your segue right there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, because we're gonna do first Chicago, then Toronto. Beautiful. Okay. Here we go. I can't be too loud. I apologize in advance.
Sorry.
Bro, Brian, do you have a fan running that I can record?
I do.
Let's be quiet for a sec. Okay. You know that you would think I don't even have to be quiet because we're recording just Brian's fan so that I can mute it from his track. But actually, sometimes on his track, you could hear my talking.
What?
Sometimes.
Really?
Like just like little murmurs. You can't hear like the
Oh,
words, but
I'm
you because you're
sorry. I guess I need to turn my volume down.
yeah, I should actually be concerned about your hearing. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
get it. I want you in my head.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
All right.
Yay! Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who haven't done a show in a while, but luckily don't have too much to catch up on, right? Psych, just kidding. Literally everything has happened, including Twitter like going down kind of on UFA day and like making our job even harder, but whatever. Brian and I are going to work through all the adversity, and we're here to talk about as much as we can about everything that's gone down. The last time Brian and I recorded a show, we talked about like Severson and Provorov going to Columbus. So basically it's like everything from then until now is on the docket for the next, I don't know, 5-6 shows. I don't know how long it'll take, but we're going to do what we can. But obviously we got to, quality, not only quantity. So we're going to, try to give you what you need to know to be successful in fantasy. Wait, this is still my intro. I'm your host, Ilan Dubrovsky, with me to help break down the biggest news in fantasy hockey and everything we need to take away from all the craziness from the last few days. It is my very good friend, my co-host, the fantasy hockey robot, the IPP MVP, Brian frickin' Com. Welcome back to Keeping Karlsson. Brian, how's it going?
Oh, it's so good, Elon. It's great to be back. It has been, I was going to say it's been a minute, but I don't think I can actually pull it off naturally. It's been a while since we've been on the show together, and I'm pumped to be back. I was really just waiting. I'm looking back to some of our shows, in the playoffs and headlined by Jordan Martinook and Joe Pavelski and Thomas Harley, Ty Carty. Like we had some really funny names that we were digging into as we got through the playoffs. So now it's everybody's in again, right? We don't have to, we have the whole league to talk about, and so many things have moved around. So I'm pumped to be here. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening and being here with us. You're the reason why we're still doing it. Also, Elon, you mentioned how Twitter is hard to access. And as I record tonight, it remains hard to access, unfortunately. But I just wanted to give a little shout out to sites like Cap Friendly, HockeyViz, Puckpedia. Like these are all like labors of love. Mostly, and I think so. Like it eventually became a business for them, but like it's also like these are independent folks who worked on their own to develop these sites and who we can really rely upon to keep giving us the goods. Also Natural Stat Trick and Evolving Wild, like Evolving Hockey, all of them. But those three, Cap Friendly, Puckpedia, and HockeyViz, I've been heavy on the last few days, and I'll continue to be heavy on tonight for the show. Also, Game Day Tweets, you guys are still working on it. We're still working on it, except I don't know who can see it. I don't know if we can.
No, everyone, Brian, don't worry about it.
Okay.
You may not be Twitter, maybe rate limited, but gamedaytweets.com, you can see all the tweets. You just, go to the news section. Shams and I have still been retweeting everything. Shams did a bang up job yesterday on July 1st, getting all the news. It's all properly tagged and signed by team.
It. I know I could see it, and I was following. It was my number one source, really, because a lot was unreliable, and I really appreciate that. So look, if you can only view 131 tweets a day, then Game Day Tweets are the ones you're going to want to see.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay, those are our Brian, save for the credits, though. Come on, what are we going to say at the end of the show now? I guess since we're talking business here, let's mention very quickly a few table setters, like represented by DobberHockey.com, another great site, by the way. Also, I'd imagine a labor of love / business. They've been all over, obviously, all the signings. I love how every article for every site of signing or trade, they always break down like who they think won and lost the trade, like whose fantasy value has gone up, whose fantasy value has gone down, like really useful stuff to be successful in fantasy, just like we're going to try to do on this show. So definitely check it out at DobberHockey.com. And what else? Well, we have our Patreon. Well, thanks so much to the patrons for your support. And as we mentioned a couple shows ago, couple registration is open. So if you want to register to join the Ultimate League, which we've already been announcing some rule changes over on our Discord, and we've got about 250 signups so far, but anyone can play, right? So become a patron. Just check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron, or you can go to couple.com. It's all linked in the show notes, but you should join this league, because then you're going to compete against the best fantasy hockey players in the world and really test your mettle and see what you can do here. But everyone is going to be on the same page, at least in terms of Brian and my opinion on all of these trades and UFA signings. So Brian, if there's nothing else, I'm ready to dive into this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So let's start in Chicago. Okay. And like, this is the one I'm going to go a little bit like, we're going to do a whole show about the draft. I actually just chatted with Peter Harling from Dogger, from,
Oh
from
boy.
Dauber Prospect Radio. I think they changed the name of it, right? Dauber, DP. It's still DPR show on Twitter.
I think it's Dauber Press. I think it was I don't know. You tell me.
I blew it. 1 sec. Let me just get this right here.
Is that confirmed? Do you have that set up already?
Yeah.
Good job.
I don't know what date, but DPR show, Dauber Prospects Report, right? It's not radio, it's report. All right. Let's start over in Chicago. We're not going to do too much draft talk because we're actually going to do a whole show about the draft. I've been chatting with Peter Harling from the Dauber Prospects Report. He has a really good podcast with Victor Nuno. Now, Peter's been doing this forever. Victor recently joined him. Victor, by the way, busy guy, 2 podcasts now. Also Fantasy Hockey Life, of course. But anyways, yeah, so we're going to talk draft stuff with him. But I think the one thing that we need to talk about here is that Chicago, of course, drafted Connor Bedard. And everyone says he's going to be this huge generational player. And I'm not trying to say it like everyone says, as if like I don't say. Like I assume everyone is correct. I've seen some stats, obviously. I've seen the highlights. Like he's incredible. And it's really exciting. He's one of these guys who's a rookie, but it's like he probably couldn't have a super fantasy relevant season even in his rookie season, which is kind of rare nowadays. Like, you look at Matty Beniers, who just won the Calder. He was like rosterable-ish for most of the season. There were stretches even where he wasn't. It was still good enough to win the Calder. I think a lot of people are expecting a lot more from Bedard, even in his first season, even in Chicago. And with the Blackhawks, they have a team with like no good players, or at least that's what it seemed like going into the offseason with all their free agents. And already last year they were so shallow. But they've made some moves, right? So they've filled out a bit to give Bedard some people to play with. They traded for Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno. They gave Nick Foligno an insane contract. I don't know why they had to pay him that much. They also gave Corey Perry. They traded for Corey Perry and gave him also. Both Foligno and Corey Perry are making $4 million this year. Like these are guys that probably couldn't have gotten like 2 million from any other team, I'm guessing. I don't know. Anyway, that's I know like Dauber had a tweet about like somehow we're in a league where Blake Wheeler got only like 1.2 and then Corey Perry and Nick Foligno got 4. They're like 3 times as good as Blake Wheeler apparently, but whatever. Those are 2 people that Chicago got. Taylor Hall is a player, of course. Athanasiou, they extended him. Ryan Donato, some people like him. So anyways, all that said, now that we're starting to see the dust settle, Brian, Connor Bedard, his rookie season, what are you expecting here? Because we're like doing, obviously, on our Discord, we've been ranking players every day. Andrea has been helping to run this, or basically running this. It's been awesome. We're on vote 46 right now, and Bedard has some votes. I think he's going to get ranked pretty soon. And other people like on the block right now that are getting some votes are like Nico Hischier, Zach Hyman, Konechny, Tuck. Like I'm looking at just the forwards here to compare apples to apples. Malkin, would you be drafting Bedard among those guys I just said? I'm just curious to get your current take. And obviously we don't know yet, but now that we've seen a little bit of the dust settle in Chicago, what this lineup is going to look like, how excited should we be?
I think you could be pretty excited. I mean, there has not been like this is the closest to McDavid level hype that we've had since Connor McDavid, right? Maybe Austin Matthews carried some of this hype too, but Connor Bedard really coming in as being like the next locked in generational superstar, no doubter, can't miss. And this has been coming for years and years and years. So for me to try and figure out exactly where Connor Bedard is going to fit into my draft next year, obviously, you know what I'm going to do, Elon. I'm going to go and see how rookies have done recently, right? Like how well can we expect rookies to do? And you already covered Matty Beniers, who was on a team that didn't really like prioritize offense, or at least localized or like really put that offensive load on one player or 2 or 3 or 4. They put it on like 14. So that's how Seattle did it. Chicago won't have that luxury. And I think that's one thing that Connor Bedard has going for him, assuming that he does play first season out of the gate. Of course, you could also, we'll know by September, right? So I'm just going to assume that he's going to play until we hear otherwise. I think the second he plays one game, I don't think it's going to be like a 9-game tryout situation, but there's lots of news and whispers to come about all of that, I'm sure.
I mean, I'll just say, like, I think it's like pretty much for sure that he's going to play. But maybe you see something I haven't.
I mean, it should be, but if I'm thinking, if you're looking at what Chicago's incentives are, like the reason to play him and to have him spend the whole season would be ticket sales, right? Like people are excited.
Well, Brian, also, I don't think they just signed Nick Foligno and Corey Perry for 1x4 to like just be there, not with Connor Bedard. I think the idea is that they're going to surround him with some veterans to give him people to play with.
Yeah, well, speaking of them, that's one way Chicago's going to get to the cap floor. And, like if they want a leadership their way to the cap floor or veteran or locker room their way up to the cap floor, that's what Chicago's doing. You know what? There are worse ways to do it than that. You could overpay someone without that sort of veteran grit or intangible leadership experience or past success. So I don't, I don't begrudge Chicago's strategy at all here, given more money. And of course, they have the money to burn. The Rangers don't. But yeah, anyway, I think it makes sense when you look at the bigger picture. Okay, so Connor Bedard, you're right. So it's one reason. It looks like I think he's going to play, Elon. I was just sort of trying to be like, well, maybe we don't know yet for sure. I mean, of course, Chicago wants to sell tickets. Why? But of course, you might also say, why do they want to burn a year of his ELC when they're definitely not going to win and also not going to have the team together that he is going to be growing with and hopefully for the franchise winning with at some point. But that's neither here nor there. Let's assume that Connor Bedard is in the lineup. He's going to play. So I'm looking at recent Calder winners. And like I said, we already looked at Beniers. The year before, Trevor Zegras was like the best Calder scorer. And he had 61 points in 75 games. So that, that's pretty good. And Zegras was actually closer to, he was 20 years old. So that was his age 20 season. And I'm looking at the year before, and you have guys like Kirill Kaprizov, who were like, he's 23, right? So there's not really a whole lot of direct comparisons we can make here. I'm looking at the best rookie seasons that we've seen over the last decade or so. You've got Matt Barzal with 85 points in 82 games, 2017-18. Artemi Panarin, although he was older too. Austin Matthews, 69 points in 82 games in 16-17. Elias Pettersson is a season that I think most of us don't. I don't think he ever really gets his due because of all the wild stuff that goes on around him. 66 points in 71. Clayton Keller, 65 and 82. So look, there's a lot of precedent for a solid 60 to 70 point rookie season.
Well, can I throw another at you?
Yeah.
How about Connor McDavid? Maybe could be a comparison since everyone's comparing the two. McDavid, 48 points in 45 games. It was the same year that Panarin was a rookie, over a point per game, but not like a 100-point player, right? He wasn't like McDavid yet, but he still was point per game. And so I feel that's like maybe a comparison that I'd be looking at as a high end. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I was working at the baseline of what we could expect. And then, the high end right there is Connor McDavid, that point per game, which, a lot of us forget because it doesn't, or it could be easily forgotten because it doesn't show up in total points. Elon, I'm curious, can you name McDavid's line mates, most common line mates from that season?
Wow. Okay. 2015-16. I actually have his Dauber page up, but I won't scroll or click to find it. Taylor Hall was on the team. I imagine Eberle was on the team.
He was.
Like all these.
There's one.
What was the name of that guy that they drafted first overall? Yakupov. Is Yakupov one of his line mates?
He was the third most common line mate. But before that was Benoit Pouliot.
Oh, yeah, I remember him. We talked about him on the show. He had fantasy relevance because he was playing with McDavid.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see if Bedard, the question for Bedard isn't, of course, he's worth drafting. I think he's worth, at least that 65-ish point, and that's conservative. If you want to swing big, I'm not the type to swing big on a rookie for scoring, but by the time I'm drafting, say 70-point players, that's when I'm looking at Connor Bedard in my draft. You could be a little less conservative and swing a little higher and look at Bedard when you get to the 75-80 point range. And by all means, you have enough reasons to do that. But my comfort level with rookies, Elon, especially because, I'm looking at McDavid playing with Pouliot and Eberle and Yakupov. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's okay. Because Connor Bedard is going to be playing with, it looks like, Taylor Hall, and then who knows, Andreas Athanasiou, Tyler Johnson, Lucas Reichel, although I don't think he'll play on the right side. And I think Taylor Hall will be on the left side on the top line. There's a lot up in the air, Nick Foligno, who knows, Corey Perry, those guys can't keep up actually. So I don't think they'll end up on the top line with Bedard. But it's when I'm trying to figure out what I want from Connor Bedard, I'm also looking at like full power play unit too. And again, like the McDavid example just throws everything off. And if Bedard becomes a cheat code like McDavid, all bets are off and go for it. Absolutely. But it's not like Bedard is stepping into a situation. Like the plus side is he's stepping into a situation where he is the guy, right? Like he doesn't have to share with anyone. Like the offense can revolve around Connor Bedard. He's not going to ease in like Quinton Byfield on the second and third lines. He's going to be in the spotlight right away. But on the other hand, there's just not a whole lot around him, but we'll see how much that really matters.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good take. You're saying kind of like Zegras is the floor around 65, not floor, but like, that's maybe a conservative thing to expect. And then like McDavid maybe is the high end around point per game. I guess if we're looking at other players on Chicago, like we have to talk about Taylor Hall, right? Who got traded there. Hall is a guy who used to be amazing in fantasy. He obviously had that heart-winning year in New Jersey where he had 93 points in 76 games. Since then, he's kind of gone downhill quite a bit up to last season where only 36 points in 61 games for Hall in Boston. So if you average that out over 82 games, that would be a 48-point pace, which would be the lowest of his entire career. That was his worst. Even his rookie season in Edmonton, he paced higher than last season in Boston. But of course, as we know, Hall was playing on the third line. And like you just outlined, Chicago does not have a plethora of great players like Boston did last year. So you would think Taylor Hall probably gets first crack of playing with Bedard. So I think that Hall becomes very interesting here. And if we're saying Bedard is like a 60 to 80 point guy, I don't see why Hall can't be whatever, I don't know, 50 to 70. Like, I don't know exactly like what you decrease, but assuming he's still good, and I think there's reason to believe he could be given the opportunity, I definitely think he's going to be worth drafting, right? And I'd be curious to see how high you're going to be expecting him to go.
Yeah, well, I've always loved me some Taylor Hall, right? I've always been a fan. I've always been a believer, and I still am. And I guess if you want to keep cooking with the comparisons here, Jordan Eberle in McDavid's first year had 56-point pace over 69 games. So of course McDavid was missing for a bunch of those games. So if you took out the ones that McDavid missed, it would look a little more impressive for Eberle. But that's
tell me what Taylor. Why don't you just tell me what Taylor Hall did that year? Since it's like the same person. It's kind of funny that Taylor Hall is now going to be on the team of this rookie generational talent for the second time, and he was also on New Jersey, I think, for Jack Hughes. Am I right about that? I might be wrong.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, either way, yeah. Taylor Hall. So what year? McDavid started in 2015.
It was 15-16. It was Hall's last season in Edmonton, and he had 65 points in 82 games and only 12 on the power play. So like Hall has had this really like strange career trajectory that we don't usually see. He's heading into his age 31 season now. He started as a rookie back in 2010-11. All right, 19 years old. Finished 9th in Calder voting with 53 points, 8 more points than him, and winning the Calder vote that year. I'm not even going to throw it to you. You can guess in your head. Jeff Skinner. How about that? And then they both have taken turns in Buffalo too. Funny how these things work out. Okay, so Taylor Hall with that decent start as a rookie, 80 points, this is sophomore, 90 points in his next 2 seasons, then down to 60 points in the 2 seasons after that, more or less. Those are his last 2 seasons in Edmonton, where he only had 18 power play points combined. He missed a few games, but still like 25 power play points over a couple seasons. Not great. Moves to New Jersey. Meh results, 60 points in New Jersey in his first year there. Then breaks through
pace, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe actually, can you start? Sorry, Brian.
You want me to just start the whole thing again?
Yeah, I'm looking at, and also I think you said he had like 80 points in his second season, but I'm not seeing that as his points or his pace. So I'm not sure where you're getting these numbers from.
I said 90-point pace.
Maybe you just go from where you started saying all the Taylor Hall numbers.
Okay, sure.
Just make sure it's clear.
Okay, great. I can do that. All right. Taylor Hall is a really strange career trajectory, right? He had a 53-point rookie season back in 2010-11 when he was 19 years old.
So it was a 53-point pace. He didn't have 53-point rookie season.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Just so
yeah, no, you're right. Okay. Taylor Hall has a really strange career trajectory, all right? He started as a rookie way back, 2010-11, 19 years old, had a 53-point pace, which was good for 9th in Calder voting, many spots behind the Calder Trophy winner, Jeff Skinner, that season. some interesting Michael Grabner in there, Sergei Bobrovsky. It's always fun to look back at Calder voting and see where everyone's career went. But we're focused on Taylor Hall's career. Hall followed that up with a 70-point pace as a sophomore, then had 2 90-point seasons. This is all in Edmonton, a 90-point pace. I'm going all paces here, by the way, because Taylor Hall's games played has fluctuated through the years, but I think generally the paces reflect where he's been at. Then Hall finished up with 2 60-ish point seasons in Edmonton, moving to New Jersey, continued with the 60-point season, which was really underwhelming, but then broke out with a couple huge seasons, 192-point pace. Couple huge seasons, that 100-point pace, massive season, which we called unsustainable on the show because of his shooting percentage, 13 power play goals and 37 power play points, which is unlike anything Hall had ever really done before. For all of Hall's accolades, he's never really had. Only 2 times Taylor Hall has registered more than 20 power play points in a season. That's not pace. That's total. He's paced above that a couple times, but still his power play point production has never been that huge. And then, of course, after New Jersey, he went to Arizona, Buffalo, and Boston, and has been pretty underwhelming through those series of stops. It's been 3 years since Hall has put up meaningful power play points. And now I think that he's got a great opportunity to do that again in Boston. The thing with Taylor Hall is he's not a finisher. He's a setup man. And he's got someone to set up in Connor Bedard. And I think he can keep up with him very well. In Boston, he was obviously buried. Like, I don't think we can look at what Taylor Hall's done over the last couple seasons and say, like, this is what we can reasonably expect from him. We saw like a real dip in his ability to finish since he moved to Buffalo, and he hasn't really come out of that. But as a setup guy, he's still been really solid and still a net gain to his team offensively while he's on the ice. Unfortunately, he was just on the ice a lot less in Boston. But this is why I'm optimistic for a really a nice redemption season from Taylor Hall, who had 65 points in McDavid's first season. And I feel like he could be in that neighborhood again with Connor Bedard this year, being on the top line, top power play, and really being set free for the first time in a couple years. He's been buried. I feel like he's got something more to give. And I'm excited to see him have the opportunity. At least, honestly, the good news for this personally about me is that I feel like Taylor Hall has had something more in the tank than what we've seen since basically his time in Buffalo. And now I get to find out whether that's true or not. And I am betting that it is.
Okay, yeah. So we'll see if Hall can meet your lofty expectations for him. You've been a fan of his for a while. I guess another guy to keep an eye on is like Seth Jones, who's had a couple mess seasons in Chicago. Well, actually, the first one wasn't bad, 51 points, but last season was not great. But Chicago didn't have anybody. So now that they're bringing in some reinforcements, they have Bedard, they have Hall. Maybe Seth Jones can be a little under the radar guy to grab at your drafts if you want some D. He's also good for the peripherals, which is always nice. Yeah, and then we'll see. We'll look at the line combos. I'll be curious to see like who gets to play with Hall and Bedard to start. And that's someone I'll take it with my last pick.
Yeah, I'm going to correct that for a sec, though. Like, Seth Jones has this like peripherals reputation. And yeah, he took 2.5 shots per game like that. And that's his standard. That's good. The shots are there, but the hits and blocks are not. Like, they are not above. They're below average for what we'd expect from a defenseman who we say has, quote, good peripherals. He's also combined to be a minus 75 the last 2 seasons. I think that'll improve for anybody who still is using plus minus. That's something to be wary of. But yeah, you have to think that having Bedard and Hall together on the power play is going to be a boon for Seth Jones, who had 19 power play points in his first season in Chicago in 78 games. Last season, 12 power play points in 72 games. I have a feeling he'll be closer to 19 than 12 this year with Bedard and Hall. And also, Elon, just going back to Hall, one easy comparison that I wanted to make.
We haven't talked.
Well, no, I just wanted to. Well, it was one thing I wanted to point out is last year Patrick Kane had 64 points with less to work with in Chicago, and being a few years older than Taylor Hall. And so I think that's a really decent baseline comparison for Taylor Hall. Yeah.
By the way, I'll say that Seth Jones, over 100 hits, over 100 blocks. I think it's a reason. I didn't say he had incredible peripherals, but they're decent enough compared
They
to some other
exist.
defensemen. Yeah. All right. So let's move on. Actually, we've already talked so long. I didn't realize we'd go so long on Chicago, but hey, we've got all summer to cover everything that's gone on. Let's take a quick break. Then we're going to come back with some more teams that did stuff aside from the Chicago Blackhawks. We'll be back in just a sec. All right, we are back, Brian. Next, I want to go to Toronto. Okay. I wasn't planning on doing Toronto next, but then right before we were preparing to record this show, they signed Tyler Bertuzzi, and Max Domi apparently is like close to being signed. It's like not fully confirmed. Maybe by the time people listen to this tomorrow, Domi will be there or not. They also signed John Klingberg yesterday for a 1 year, 4.15 mil contract. It's actually funny. Bertuzzi, Klingberg, Domi, Dom tweeted this. Like all three of these guys are being rumored, well, for Domi, like 1 year contracts. The only guy they signed that's getting term is Ryan Reeves, who they signed for 3 years at 1.35. Isn't Ryan Reeves like 37 years old, or like they're gonna have him until he's 40?
I read that the only condition, like the only way they could sign him is if they gave him the term.
Well,
so they gave it to him.
We'll see how that works out for them. But yeah, I mean, Toronto needed to sign all these guys because they're losing a lot of people from last year, right? They had no more Kerfoot, no more Bunting, no more Ryan O'Reilly or Luke Shen, who were their pickups at the deadline. So yeah, now all of a sudden we look to next year, and Andy's saying here in the chat, Toronto's going to be a train wreck next year. But I mean, okay, I don't know. Will they? Like Tyler Bertuzzi is a solid player, good on the power play, right? Good at being net front there. Anyways, I mean, I guess it could be a whole separate discussion of like, is Toronto going to be good or not? I feel like they'll probably be similar to how they were last year. If I were to break this down, I know people are maybe not so excited about the John Klingberg, saying they already have like a defenseman like him and Morgan Rielly, but you know, Klingberg isn't nothing. But anyway, I'm excited about Bertuzzi. I want to talk about him, but I'm going to say right now, and we'll see as we go if like we have someone that you disagree with. I think Bertuzzi probably has the biggest increase in his fantasy value from the end of last season, the beginning of next season with this signing. Like, this is a guy who was also being buried in Boston by the time he got there. And he's going to Toronto, where like Michael Bunting was in a really good spot, right? With Matthews and Marner for a lot of like 2 seasons ago. And last year things were getting mixed around a bit. But I assume that with Michael Bunting gone, Bertuzzi can just take that spot. And why not, right? And Bertuzzi would play with Austin Matthews and Marner or Nylander or whatever. You know, I think he's better than Michael Bunting, right? So if Bunting was able to be like a 60-ish point pace guy a couple years ago in his rookie season, couldn't Bertuzzi do something similar? Maybe 60, maybe 70? Like, I'm pretty stoked. Like, I think that, like, I'm ready for you to throw some cold water here, but I don't see any reason to not expect like a really big season from Tyler Bertuzzi. And also, as a side thing, I'm really pissed off because I had him in my dynasty league and I dropped him in the playoffs because he was doing nothing with Buffalo. And I figured because he was doing nothing with Boston. And I figured, whatever, he's going to be a UFA. He's probably going to sign like 7-year contract for like way too much money. You know how teams love to give so much money to these guys when they're around 30 years old. And now, like, if I would have known he was going to sign only a 1-year deal, I would have held on, especially going to Toronto. So this is surprising. I'm surprised Bertuzzi wasn't able to get more offers. Maybe people don't like him or something, but whatever. He's on the Leafs. I think he's going to get top line deployment. I'm curious to see what you think.
Bertuzzi will make a really good, I made the Hall Kane comparison. One reason I did that was to set the table for another comparison I want to make now in Toronto, where Bertuzzi, I think, can step in and basically be the Michael Bunting, like step right in. And like you said, be in a top 6 role. Either line, Tavares or Matthews is being considered top line, essentially. And maybe Bertuzzi can also step in to the top power play situation too. And I know it's not the most exciting comparison because Bunting did not come off such a great season, but last year we were talking about how we thought we could have expected to see a little more from Bunting than we did, although we did lose power play deployment. He wasn't on the top power play for a whole lot of the season, which we'll see how things change. And like, one big overall Toronto note, by the way, is like, this team is different, right? Like, you're already like Brad Treliving and the GM seat is like, bringing back in one of the old school hockey books and saying, okay, we want guys who are tough to play against, are going to make you mad. And that's why we have Ryan Reeves to create more noise. And by the way, like, I know, I don't want to get too deep into this, but of course, like, it's all like, oh, like Ryan Reeves, his team sucks with him on the ice. And like, this is what Brian would normally say. It's like, this is dumb. Like, what a bad idea. But like, I believe there still is something to, like, I don't know, like, tone setting and cohesion, like these intangibles. We did talk about it years back. I don't know if you remember. We had a social scientist, Stefan Vallejo, come on the show and talk about how these things might not be measured. And we call them intangibles because we're not measuring them. And I guess my question isn't necessarily how bad Ryan Reeves' teams are when he's on the ice. I want to know if they're any better while he's off the ice. Do his contributions from the bench outweigh anything he takes away for the 9 minutes a night that he's on the ice? Because if they do, they do. And I think the Leafs are hoping the same thing from Tyler Bertuzzi. I think they're hoping for it from Max Domi if that signing comes to fruition. But to go back to Bertuzzi specifically, Elon, I like your take that I think Taylor Hall's value actually might be the biggest one to increase this offseason. I would put an early bet down against you to say Taylor Hall's delta compared to last year will be better than Tyler Bertuzzi's. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I probably would take that bet. I mean, let me just take a look at what did Bertuzzi end up with last year. Taylor Hall was around a 48.
They both had 49. Yeah, they both had sub 50 point paces. So if you said,
so we just have to bet on like who's going to have a better pace next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would take Bertuzzi over Hall.
Yeah, well, and that's reasonable. Like one of the reasons Bertuzzi was only a 49 point pace last year is because he only shot 7.5%. And in his career, he's routinely doubled that number. So you can toss on another 8 goals and he only played 50 games. So that's like another, 12, 15 points tacked on to his pace right there for the season. But one thing we didn't like about Bertuzzi last year was that his shots dipped after he had increased them the season prior in Detroit. But that also might speak to the decreased power play role that Bertuzzi had while he was with Detroit, and which sort of continued into Boston too. So I'm looking for Bertuzzi to get some of those power play minutes and shots and points back. And I'm looking for his shooting percentage to regress. And if both those things happen, I think 65 is a great spot to put him at. And maybe his upside is higher than Taylor Hall's. Maybe I'm already going to talk myself out of this bet. But I think they're both about equal in terms of who's going to be able to step up the most in their new destination. Tyler Bertuzzi makes a great draft day. I mean, it's hard to steal a Toronto Maple Leaf because there's so much spotlight. Like I'll probably be on the cover of the fantasy hockey magazines just by virtue of being the new, like it'll be like Bertuzzi, Reeves, and Domi, and like Klingberg like hiding in the background for who's going to be on the cover of all the pool guides that are still sold on magazine racks. But I think Bertuzzi could absolutely be one of the candidates to have the most improved season because of a change in scenery.
And then maybe quickly on John Klingberg. Do you think there's any chance he can steal that top power play? I know for years we've been talking about different people that we thought had a chance to steal it. Rasmus Sandin. I know some of the people thought maybe could take it from Morgan Rielly. I know that like Morgan Rielly is solid, but not like a superstar. It doesn't seem like he's like the best, top power play quarterback. But John Klingberg's also like really fallen off from back when he was putting up those huge numbers in Dallas. Like last year's season was like pretty much a disaster, right? Like he signed that 1-year deal with Anaheim hoping to prove himself, and he ended up with only a 40-point pace, which was his lowest season of his career. So yeah, what do you think about Klingberg in Toronto? Like same as last year, or do you think he could get back to that like 50 plus? Obviously, this depends on like trying to predict what will happen with deployment, which is hard. It's probably all going to come down to the power play, right?
I feel like the biggest impact for Klingberg arriving in Toronto, the biggest fantasy impact, is putting that question mark on Morgan Rielly completely. Like the Leafs have shown that they don't, they were running 5 forwards with him last year. Oh, and I never made my big Toronto wide point that I wanted to make, which is that it seemed like Dubas and Keefe were working really well together at building the team and working towards a shared vision that they both had, right? Like Dubas and Keefe like seemed to be a team, right? They seemed like Dubas would get players, Keefe would know how to use them, and it was like a nice symbiotic, simpatico relationship. Whereas now you've got Brad Treliving coming in. Sheldon Keefe still has his job, but is he on the hot seat after, who knows? Dubas took the fall so far. But I wonder if the players Brad Treliving is assembling are players that Sheldon Keefe knows how to use and is is even bought in to using. I see a comment in the chat already that says like Bertuzzi, Andy in the chat is saying, the Leafs might misuse him. He's going to be one of those players that was good on the Bruins, but who the Leafs misuse massively. And I could see like there could be some really interesting dynamics if coach and GM are no longer on the same page in Toronto, because Treliving is definitely pushing in one direction here, and it's a direction that is notably substantially different than the framework Keefe has been working with for the last little while. So I think that's one thing to just keep an eye on for how we expect any new Leafs player to make the adjustment and how it impacts the rest of the lineup at the same time. But Klingberg specifically, Elon, I think it's super weird. I think the last things the Leafs needed was like a kind of dubiously responsible defensive defenseman, or dubiously defensively responsible offensive defenseman. Those are the right words, even if they're still in the wrong order. And that's what they're getting in John Klingberg. He was brutal last year defensively, and maybe that had something to do with the chaos around him in Anaheim. Yeah, but he's been in the red for a few years now in terms of his defensive play, and he's always offset that with his offensive play. But I don't know that this is what the Leafs need or how exactly they're going to use it. So again, like, I'm not really going to draft Klingberg unless like he's locked in. But based on today, if I were drafting today, I wouldn't draft him based on my hopes and wishes that he takes over the top power play, but I would use this information to knock Morgan Rielly down my draft list, because this is just another red flag to go along with the lack of faith the Leafs have shown in Rielly to date as their surefire power play one quarterback.
Yeah. I'm interested in like this Ryan O'Reilly not coming back to the Leafs. It seemed like it was a pretty good fit there. And O'Reilly now is going to Nashville. 4 years, 4.5 mil. I wonder if it's the kind of thing where, like, if the Leafs knew they could get him for that price, maybe they would have gone for him. I'm always interested in stuff like this. If when teams like give up on a player, then they sign somewhere else for like, a pretty reasonable contract. But anyways, Brian, I guess we could go to a lot of places now. Maybe let's go to Nashville. They're actually a very interesting team that have done some odd things over these past few weeks, because they were kind of looking like they're a team that's doing a rebuild, right? They traded Ryan Johansson and are covering 50% of his contract. They trade Ryjo to the Avs for Galchenyuk, but then like the Avs didn't even keep Galchenyuk. So it's basically just, dumped his contract. Then they waived Matt Duchene, who still had like 3 years left on his deal. Like, it's going to be like a long buyout, which I was not expecting. I didn't even have that on my radar at all, that like Matt Duchene was on the hot seat. So he's gone. So then you make you think, all right, this team is like totally starting over. But then they've made a couple like veteran free agent signings. They signed Ryan O'Reilly, 4 years, 4.5 mil. They signed Gustav Nyquist, 2 years, 3.1. So I don't get exactly what Nashville is doing, but I will like point out that they were looking like pretty good at the end of last season. If you recall, people might not remember, like we were talking about the Predators a lot because they had a bunch of like nobodies. Like Philip Forsberg was injured, and like as far as the forwards went, there was like all players that a lot of people hadn't heard of that were doing like really well out of nowhere. Like Cody Glass was looking good, Tomasino. There was that line of like Novak, Sherwood, and what's that other guy's name? I don't know. There were so many like
Evangelista.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. So Novak, Sherwood, and Evangelista. Like, I don't know, there were like all these names of players that were doing pretty well and looking like they could be like top 6, top 9 players in the league. So if you have those names I just said, now if you throw in Ryan O'Reilly, like Gustav Nyquist, get Philip Forsberg back, hopefully, all of a sudden, like this seems like this could actually be a good team now. And maybe they just like needed to dump the dead weight in their mind, at least, of Ryjo and Duchene. And I guess we'll see what happens. On defense, they've got Roman Josi, they've got Ryan McDonough, who they traded for. They have Tyson Barrie for whatever that's worth. I know that a lot of people are thinking that Dante Fabro might be good. I don't know. Anyway, and then of course I have UC Saros in net, who could steal games even on a bad team. So I guess before we dive into like the fantasy value of some of these guys, like Nashville overall, like are they rebuilding? Or like, are they a playoff team? Like, I don't
know. They're like redecorating. That's what the Predators are doing. I keep in mind, like they've had a big front office change, right? But their GM is like of 20 or 30 or however many years it's been by now. David Poyle stepping aside, Barry Trotz coming in that role, and Andrew Brunette replacing John Hines. And we last saw Andrew Brunette coaching the like league leading Florida Panthers until they lost to the Lightning in the playoffs of not this past summer, but the summer prior. And that was the end for Andrew Brunette. And it was kind of surprising because he'd gotten a lot out of that team. And it'll be really interesting to see what he can do with Nashville. Like Andrew Brunette seems like someone who can clearly run a super high octane offense. And so part of what's happening, I'm trying to like align those two things, like Andrew Brunette, offensive coach, Duchesne and Johansson leaving, O'Reilly and Nyquist coming in, and it doesn't like totally fit. So my guess about what's happening in Nashville is they're setting a new tone. They want Ryan O'Reilly as like a new leader. They didn't think Duchesne or Johansson were quite up to the job of leading the team forward and being, you know, that veteran, solid presence who can set the tone for all the young ones. I don't think, Elon, that they're so ready to all of a sudden come in. Like I'm looking at their other signings, like Nyquist. Yeah, he'll fill out the middle six, I guess. Maybe he'll step into the top three every so often. But Nyquist has not been someone who can produce really like in a consistent way for the large majority of his career, and especially lately. So I think he's going to be a similar piece to what he was or in San Jose, for example, where it was like, hey, we just need a body and we don't want to put one of our young guys here because they're not ready. And we want someone we can just rely on to be like a half decent player. So you're in. And Luke Shen also seems like a kind of veteran presence kind of signing too. So I think what Nashville's doing is sort of just setting the table. I thought with Duchesne and Johansson gone, like I was really surprised that O'Reilly got brought in, and I was ready to think, yeah, Nashville's going to start the tank now. Here we go. But I guess they're going to retool is what I see. And you already mentioned all the guys on the come up that they have, and Cody Glass and Luke Evangelista and Tommy Novak and Kiefer Sherwood and Jakub Trenin and Phil Tomasino and like Yusuf Parson, all these guys who made at least a splash last year and could be up for more. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, what they earned in John Hines' on John Hines' bench versus what they will earn on Andrew Brunette's bench, and if their deployment will change at all. So my overall takeaway here, Elon, is like huge change in Nashville, and I don't know how I want to play it. Like Roman Josi, I'll still expect to be like a dominant fantasy force. Yuzi Saros, I'll still expect to be a really great option in net. Philip Forsberg, I could go like either way of 70 points for him, depending on how things go. Like a lot of changing chemistry, including behind the bench. And then the rest, I think I'll be ready to pluck out a free agency if I see them having great deployment, or grab them with a late draft waiver if I see them having great deployment in training camp or getting some early looks on the power play.
So you're not like thinking like Ryan O'Reilly, lock in, top line center, top power play. Because Ryan O'Reilly.
Do you remember how you felt about Ryan O'Reilly last year?
Most of the season, I drafted him actually on like a couple team. Probably a big reason why I lost the thing, because I thought he was going to be decent enough in St. Louis, and then he really like was nothing. I guess your point here is that Ryan O'Reilly is not like the player he once was. It's not just like a down year. Like, it's not like a Taylor Hall situation. It sounds like you're saying, where like you think he was just buried. It's like you think just Ryan O'Reilly like isn't the same guy, and no matter what like deployment he gets, like you shouldn't expect too much from him. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, like Ryan O'Reilly has long been a pretty frustrating fantasy option. At 5-on-5, though, like he's still proven himself to be like pretty useful offensively. So I'm not at all ruling out the possibility that he can have another like strong fantasy relevant season. But I don't know, Elon. It's just been a while since I've seen a whole lot to love about Ryan O'Reilly. So I guess that's the reason for my hesitance. Plus, if he's not playing, I assume he's playing on the top line and top power play with Forsberg, which should mean, yeah, like I'll take him for 55, 60 points, but I just don't see a whole lot of upside beyond that. Plus, not a whole lot of shots to go with it. Plus, maybe a little downside too, depending on how things go.
Yeah. And plus, of course, it's not a guarantee, right? Like we saw last year, Cody Glass was looking good. Tommy Novak was looking good. Like if O'Reilly struggles or if things aren't working, like those are two centers that could potentially usurp him to play with Forsberg or to play with whoever. Not like I said, there's a lot of random guys that maybe would be good to play with. Maybe like the one playing with Tomasino is actually the lucky one outside of Forsberg. So it'll be really fun to see what happens over in Nashville. Yeah, very interesting team. Let's take a break again, Brian. And then we'll let's jump to the team that took Duchesne next, I guess. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Listen to Kevin Karlsson. All right, we are back. So yeah, Nashville. I mean, they did a lot of stuff that we can go in all kinds of directions, right? Like we can go to where Ryan Johansson went in Colorado. Maybe we could go there next. But first, let's go to Dallas, where they grabbed Duchesne for this like 1 year, $3 million. Which, like Brian, I know you love Taylor Hall. Another thing I know about you is you love Matt Duchesne.
Yeah, I was actually biting my tongue from jumping in. I love this for Dallas. I love it. It seems to me like a perfect move for them. It's almost it's like another Sagan option. Like you have two super talented, maybe past their prime, sure, but super talented, toolsy offensive centermen who you're not asking to do the heavy lifting. You're asking to do the secondary scoring, which Dallas has like struggled with for a very long time. Like last year, we saw a fourth forward be fancy relevant in Jamie Benn because of his power play deployment, and Tyler Seguin like was here and there, but mostly because of opportunities due to injuries in front of him. But I think this makes this really bolsters the top 6 and top 9 for Dallas. And I don't know that it's going to be great news. Like, I don't think things are going to be any better for Matt Duchene in Dallas than it has been for Tyler Seguin. But I for Dallas, I like it. For fancy relevance for Duchene, I don't. But he's already had a couple of years of pretty fringy, what's the word I'm looking for? Tenuous relevancy.
I see. So you're saying you like it for Dallas, but Matt Duchene is not someone you're going to be reaching to draft. I guess like we're going to assume that if everyone's healthy, we're just going to roll back with Pavelski, Hintz, Robertson, and Jamie Benn as the forwards on the power play. So no slot for Duchene to jump in on.
No, like I don't see why they would mix with like one of their biggest weapons last season was that top power play. So I think so long as Pavelski is walking and playing and skating, then I think he's locked in there. And same goes for Jamie Benn, who is 5 years younger than Joe Pavelski, but I feel no less reliable physically.
Yeah, well, I mean,
no more reliable, no more physically reliable.
Right. Yeah. Ben plays a hard game. So maybe that has worn on him a little bit, but great year last year, especially on that power play. Yeah. Dallas, I guess at the end of the day, they lost Max Domi, who they didn't even have for most of the year anyways. They gained they're keeping Dodonov. That's another guy who probably we don't really need to talk about. He'll probably continue to do whatever he was doing in Dallas before. And they took a swing on Sam Steele, who had some relevance at times in Minnesota. Signed Craig Smith. I don't know. It seems to me like Dallas is kind of going to be the same team as last year, except they have a Matt Duchene now, so maybe that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I think they shored things up. Like this is what a team who gets to the conference finals and is still keeping all their key pieces from that run should do. Right? It's like, okay, where were we weak? Let's toss a little here, toss a little there. You're not making any big changes. And getting out of the West. I mean, Vegas, we thought the West was wide open and no competition. And the East was your gauntlet. And then the West, like Vegas wins the cup, although maybe that's because the East all beat up on each other first. Or maybe it's, well, whatever. I don't think I've shared my thoughts on the cup final.
Oh, yeah. Congrats to the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, they did it. Cup. And to the Panthers on a fantastic run. I saw one, I think I mentioned this on the Patron cast, Elon, because it's sounding familiar to myself. I think I've shared this already, but I saw one tweet from a writer I follow named Dan Gardner, who's like, he's not a hockey guy, or like he loves the Bruins and he'll talk all about that. But like hockey is not his niche. He writes about like forecasting and probability and why we get things right and why we get things wrong and how to make things go well. And he basically said, like, when assessing the Panthers run, he's like, well, the one thing about incredible runs of luck is that they're followed by luck running out. And I think that's sort of, not to take anything away from the Panthers, but I think that is at least a piece of what happened and what left the cup. I mean, and also Matthew Tkachuk being injured didn't help at all. But anyway, that's a piece. I think the West still remains pretty open for Dallas, and I like what they're doing in sort of, just bolstering and retooling and tweaking to get things right. I think Dodonov is a nice way to fill that middle six. I think Duchene is a great piece too. And they have some injury insurance too. If any of their big guys do go down, you've got a few guys who can step up.
Yeah, I guess I've been a bit concerned about their defense. Not that we have to make this a Dallas Stars podcast. Like, obviously, Heiskanen's incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if he even builds on his 76-point pace from last season. But aside from him, I guess we're hoping Thomas Harley takes a step forward. I know a lot of people were not too excited about what they saw from Ryan Suter. So anyway, we'll see what happens over in Dallas. But Brian, I guess let's go to Colorado. That we still haven't covered actually a couple of big trades that happened like a couple of weeks ago. So let's go to Colorado and then we'll jump over to the big trade where Pierre-Luc Dubois got moved. And then we'll talk about the Tyler Toffoli trade and then we'll see where we are. Okay. That's the agenda for the next 10, 15, 20, knowing us 30 minutes. But yeah, I want to go to Colorado. So they traded Galchenyuk to get Ryan Johansson. You'd think, okay, well, what center spot is he going to take? Well, they traded Alex Newhook to Montreal. So I guess maybe you can just fill that in there. Colorado's also made some other interesting moves, right? They traded for Ross Colton, one of the picks that they got for Newhook. They traded for Ross Colton. They took a swing on Jonathan Drouin, who was drafted, I believe, Brian, the same year as McKinnon, just a couple picks apart. If that's you can check if I'm right on that. I feel like it was like McKinnon and then Drouin from Tampa.
I know. Yeah. Sorry, I'll jump in. Yes. And they played together in Halifax too. So it was McKinnon, Barkov was the one in between, then Drouin, then Seth Jones. Look at that. So many guys we're talking about today.
And if you think about it, like they've lost Evan Rodriguez. He's signed in Florida. They've lost Compher. So I wonder what happens with some of these new guys like Ryan Johansson, or probably like Ross Colton and like Miles Wood, we could assume are just like, bottom six. Like we know what type of players those guys are, but I'm interested specifically in, like you'd think Ryan Johansson has a shot, and you'd also think that Jonathan Drouin has a shot to potentially get a top six, at least opportunity, because someone has to play the spot that like Evan Rodriguez was getting last year. Do we still even know? We don't know much about Nichushkin yet. I think I saw a tweet at some point saying that Nichushkin is like going to be back in normal next season. We literally haven't heard anything since he missed the whole first round, aside from the first game, because of that whole incident in the hotel room and whatever. So, but assuming he's there, but Compher is gone. He was getting a lot of top power play last year. So I want to get a general take on like, how is Colorado's like, top six and top power play? Like, be an oracle for me, Brian. Like, who am I interested in here?
Okay, well, there's two guys last year who were back and forth and like sometimes got bumped from the top unit, like Lehkonen and Nichushkin. I mean, injuries really helped them both stick when they were healthy, but these guys, we were always wondering, okay, like, is there going to be a mix? Are they going to be bumped off of line one or off the top power play? And I think the lack of other options with Landeskog, also, of course, still injured and like done for who knows how long, right? Like I'm working on the assumption, he's not coming back for a full season, which means I think this sort of guarantees the fantasy value of Lehkonen, and assuming Nichushkin is back, then both of those guys have their value guaranteed. I mean, sure, maybe Drouin or Johansson could wiggle their way in, but they're guys who haven't been able to crack a top power play on teams that could barely fill one already. So unless they find a new angle to their game, they find a way to be like this power play specialist in one particular way the Avs need them to be, I would expect Lehkonen, McKinnon, Rantanen, and Nichushkin to be the way the top power play shakes out. Right. And I expect also Lehkonen, McKinnon, and Rantanen to stick together on the top line. Like, I think it's worth just taking a moment to remember where Lehkonen was like not that long ago, right? Is like in Montreal, couldn't really get a sustained crack at the top line. He'd already been like, he played 5 full seasons with Montreal and averaged like a 28 point pace.
That's what makes me interested in like
15
Johansson
minutes
and
a night.
Drouin.
Yeah, right. So because are you thinking that one of them could jump up to the top line and displace Lehkonen? Or are you just thinking that Colorado could find something about them to work into? Because like Lehkonen leaving Montreal, I think there were signs that Lehkonen could be more than the player he was being used as. And I can't say the same that I've seen the same from Johansson or Drouin recently, and they're also older.
Yeah, look, I guess all I'm saying is these are guys that are on my radar right now. It's a top 6, right? Like sometimes they even split McKinnon and Rantanen. I could see the top 6 being basically McKinnon, Rantanen, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, Drouin, and Ryan Johansson. I mean, Drouin's obviously like in a big wild card. Like we don't know. He's been through a lot, but we have seen in Montreal when he does play, he seems to still be able to put up some points. We'll have to see how things shake out there. But I feel like there's a potentially that could be the top 6 in some combination. And I just, this is Colorado. They score a lot of goals. So I feel like something could happen here with some of these guys.
And McKinnon and Rantanen can each drive their own lines. That's a really good point you make. And I could see for vibes, Drouin being paired up with McKinnon as they were back in the QMJHL. How long ago now? About a decade ago at this point. So with that, tantalizing idea, and to maybe rejuvenate and see what Drouin can kickstart Drouin and see what he's got left in the tank, if anything, I could totally see that happening. But either way, Elon, like I would say whoever plays with McKinnon or Rantanen is in good shape, but my confidence is still highest in Lehkonen and Nichushkin being able to make the most of those opportunities.
Yeah. And I'll just say in general, I think Colorado's done really well. Like this is a team that, has a lot of high end talent, probably doesn't have a lot of money to spend. And they got like Ryjo for half price. They got Drouin for nothing. And then Miles Wood, like I said, like is like, and Ross Colton, these aren't like fantasy game breakers. These are like solid pieces for them in their bottom six. And we always talk about how great that defense is on Colorado and how they're so stacked. So I think they've just done a really good job of maintaining their stackedness, even because after they won the cup they lost to some key pieces, but I feel like this looks like a really strong team. I think they've done a good job at this this offseason.
Yeah, they also brought Cogliano like back into the mix too. And I like, there's a lot of like whatever went out the door I think came back in reasonably similar measure. There was one point I was it was going to be about like Newhook being gone and Tyson Jost. Joe Sakic does not care where you were drafted, right? Like Joe Sakic decides pretty quickly when he wants to cut bait on prospects, which might be a really positive trait for him. Not that he's netted a whole lot in return for either of Jost or Newhook, but I think it at least does say something when your GM knows when to cut bait. Although I guess we'll see if Newhook has anything more to give in a new location. It's a classic Montreal Canadiens bet these days to find that centerman like Kirby Dach, who's not getting the chance to really thrive by the team that drafted him, and say, here, why don't you try doing your thing over on our team?
And I'll give it to you that Joe Sakic is like not going to hang on to someone if they're not valuable, but like I don't know if he like has the perfect timing for cutting bait. Otherwise he would have gotten more of a return on Newhook like a couple seasons ago, when he still had a lot of value. Now, he was worth a couple picks.
I'm not saying like Joe Sakic is Nostradamus and saw this coming. I'm just saying like I can't think of a team that has cut ties with two high pedigree prospects so early.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should mention, so Newhook 16th overall back in 2019, not too long ago. Last season, well, he's played two like pretty much full seasons, and couldn't pace for more than like 38 points. 2 seasons ago, he had 33 points in 71 games. Last season, only 30 points in 82 games. It's not like he's even had terrible like time on ice. Like he's been around 14 minutes. So yeah, the production definitely hasn't been there. We'll see what happens in Montreal. We'll talk about Montreal a bit later. Here, Brian, here's a fun comparison. I got 3, I guess, former centers, some of them centers, some of the former centers that we've talked about so far that all at one time were like superstars in the league that we've talked about on this show. For next season, who would you rather have if you have to pick right now? Ryan Johansson, Ryan O'Reilly, Matt Duchene.
I'll take Ryan O'Reilly because I'm pretty sure he's playing with Philip Forsberg.
Right
at 5-on-5 and on the power play, and none of the other guys. Like it's a true deployment question, right? Like all of these guys you could consider amazing and great deployment or terrible and meaningless deployment. So I think the question is not who's the better player, but who's most likely to get the best deployment. And I will rank it O'Reilly, then Johansson, then Duchene.
Okay. Ryan Johansson's probably not amazing anymore, right? Even in good deployment. I know Duchene.
Okay, not amazing, but if you're in Colorado and you're playing with Rantanen or McKinnon, then
that's pretty good.
You're going to be like, I'll stream you in for a couple games.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? If the Ottawa Senators had an opening and you can get one of these players for 1 year, $1 million, who do you want? Duchene, right?
Yeah, I think so. Except I was looking at O'Reilly's Hockey Viz isolated impact. He was amazing last year at 5-on-5, like almost an extra half expected goal per 60, which is huge. Like most players are like, like a little tick up or a little tick down, like between 1 to 4% up or down. And Ryan O'Reilly increased the chances, like expected goals rates for his team while he was actually, yeah, just a sec. And Ryan O'Reilly increased the expected goals rates of his team by 17%. That's that's a massive impact. That's even bigger. That's the biggest impact of all the guys we've talked about on the show. For context, so far, the next highest impact was Tyler Bertuzzi at 11%. So they lose O'Reilly, but they bring in Bertuzzi in Toronto. So hopefully that washes out for them offensively, and those guys are allowed to create offense the same way they were with their old teams.
All right, so let's do these trades that happened a few weeks ago now. Let's go to LA here and Winnipeg. So big blockbuster, right? Pierre-Luc Dubois goes from Winnipeg to LA, and LA sends like half their forwards, like Iafallo, Velarde, Kupari, and a pick. And then LA gets Pierre-Luc Dubois right away, signs him to 8-year, 8.5 per year extension. So like he's locked in LA forever. The funny thing is, like, I remember everyone was talking about forever that he was going to go to Montreal at some point, but I guess that's not happening. Montreal got Newhook instead. So it'll be fun to follow if Montreal fans are like so sad to lose Pierre-Luc Dubois. Curious to get your take now. There's other things LA is here. Let me just run down because LA's had a pretty busy offseason, right? They also traded Sean Durzi to Arizona for a second. I liked Durzi. We talked about him a lot during the season. I'd always be kind of high on him.
Do you feel at all like, and I was usually like, the Kings don't really have a spot for him to do his offensive thing. So like, I don't know. I'm not saying I was right or anything, but I felt a little bit redeemed when they traded Durzi because I spent most of the first half of the season saying like, I don't think he's going to be the guy.
I mean, you could be, I don't know what you're right about, because I think that, yeah, he's not going to be the guy in LA. You're definitely right about that.
Yeah.
I do think there's an argument to be made that he's going to have an opportunity to be the guy in Arizona. Like it's him and Valimaki, I guess.
So now let's see. Like I'm more interested in him now as a Coyote versus when he was on LA. So okay. I'm ready to make that change, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, LA has Drew Doughty, right? So there wasn't, but Durzi was still getting a lot of power play points. But anyways, he's gone. We'll talk about him when we get to Arizona at some point. LA loses Eunice Corpusalo and Jonathan. Well, Jonathan quickly lost a while ago, but anyways, whatever. They lost Corpusalo to free agency. They signed Cam Talbot to a 1-year, $1 million contract plus some bonuses. So it looks like they're going to be going with Talbot and Phoenix Copley as their tandem for next year. They also signed David Riddick. Anyways, whatever. Okay, let's start with the big hitter here. I just wanted to run down what LA's been up to. But yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Brian, like, what should we expect from him moving forward? Dubois is someone who's had some big seasons, but also last year, not like super exciting over in Winnipeg. I'm just bringing up his stats right now. I couldn't type it fast enough. Is that Pierre-Luc Dubois? Oh, wait, sorry. Let me start again. What are we expecting from Dubois over in LA? He's coming off a career year. If you look at points over Winnipeg last year, he had 63 points in 73 games. We cracked the 70-point pace. Before that, he was a 60-ish point guy the year before in Winnipeg, which we all recall was like a little bit disappointing when he got there at first. But things seem to be going pretty well, but obviously not for him because he didn't want to be there anymore. Or it was actually the year before where he really like struggled when he first got to Winnipeg midway through the season. He had that one good year with 61 points in his second year with Columbus. But yeah, like if Dubois is just correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, Dubois is like a 60 to 70 point player. It doesn't seem like someone worth like a 8-year, $8.5 million contract. So do you think that it's like LA, or obviously there's more than just points, so maybe he's supposed to be good defensively, but I thought that there was an issue where he wasn't like necessarily that good defensively. So what's the take on Dubois? Is he worth this contract? And in terms of fantasy, do you think he's like similar to what he did last year? Or do you think like he has upside for even more now that he's on the Kings?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that I don't like about Dubois' upside next year in LA is that he's still going to be playing behind Kopitar, right? For the foreseeable future. I don't expect him to get a look. I think he's the next Kopitar in LA because, well, he's had a bit of a funny career. Like Pierre-Luc Dubois made his name in Columbus as being like a reasonably responsible two-way centerman. Like not perfectly responsible and had his warts, but at the start of his career, especially like his first couple seasons in the league, Dubois looked like somebody that, yeah, you could trust at both ends of the ice. And during the end of his Columbus tenure, when he stopped caring, and then when he came to Winnipeg, he again had mixed results at 5-on-5 between offense and defense. Like 1 year, Dubois' first full season in 21-22 with Winnipeg, he was very defensively responsible. The last season, he was not. So I feel like Dubois has the capacity to be this responsible two-way centerman. Maybe no one is quite Anze Kopitar. No one is, I don't think, as good as Kopitar, or as Kopitar is or was at what he's done as a two-way center in LA. But I think Dubois, when he wants to be, which is like a kind of a key thing. Like he seems to come in and out of caring or being happy. But I would assume, hey, like he has now chosen his destination he's committed to this big contract. He's signed on the dotted line. So I would hope that Pierre-Luc Dubois plays at both ends of the ice the way that I assume the Kings would like him to. And like you said, Elon, pretty reliable 60 to 70 point player. The 70-point pace this season came, like I said, in a defensively kind of irresponsible season. Not terrible, but not his most responsible season. But he's still shown that he can be a two-way centerman and still get 60 points. My overall question for LA with acquiring Dubois is, there's a couple takeaways for me here. Okay. The first is that this to me signals that the Kings see Quinton Byfield as a winger for the short term and maybe for the long term, because don't forget the Kings have Phil Deneau signed to $5.5 million contract through to the 26-27 season. And so we've seen Deneau, Moore, Arvidsson as a trio, right? And then you've got Anze Kopitar and as your other center, and Pierre-Luc Dubois as your other center. So I guess Pierre-Luc Dubois eventually maybe steps up to 1C for Anze Kopitar. But even then, Deneau's still in the picture. So unless the Kings roll like a really even top 9, I assume Byfield stays on the wing. One other impact that this might have for LA is that Moore, Deneau, Arvidsson combo, I'm wondering if they're still like the second line, or if maybe they're bumped to the it's all semantics, right? But now I'm taking the long route to say one guy who I think could really benefit from this is Kevin Fiala, who benefits when he is playing with someone who can drive play and can be responsible, and let Fiala do a little more of his fulfill a little more of his creative tendencies, and without leaving the defensive side so glaringly open. So of course, like if you have Kopitar, Kempe, Byfield, Moore, Deneau, Arvidsson, and then Fiala, Dubois, Kaliev, Trevor.
Yeah.
Like, is
I think
there someone else?
I think you actually just nailed it. I think those are the 3 lines, and I feel like LA looks really strong with those 3 lines.
Yeah, so this could be good news for Fiala. This could be news for Kaliev. I think you're just those wingers who didn't have those centermen to stick to are the ones who win here from Pierre-Luc Dubois coming to LA. Pierre-Luc Dubois might come to LA and just keep doing what he's done and be in that 60 to 70 point range. But I think he's going to offer some offensive opportunities to the others who were sort of left off the Kopitar line and were considered defensively responsible enough to play on the second line with Deneau.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Kevin Fiala, he put up above point per game last season, 72 points in 69 games. And yeah, who was his most common center? I guess there were some injuries, like Trevor Moore was injured for a while. So then Fiala was playing with Deneau and Arvidsson. But sometimes he was playing with Alex Iafallo and Blake Lizotte, I'm seeing. It seems like Kevin Fiala, yeah, if he could just lock in with a really good centerman like Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Fiala, this might surprise you. He played most with Kopitar and Kempe.
I think that was at the start of the year. I feel like by the end they weren't doing that anymore.
It was the first half of the season.
Yeah, because by the second half they had Quinton Byfield that went up to play with Kopitar, and I think they liked that. I think that went well. So I think it's probably.
I think they're going to keep it. Yeah, and so you had Fiala playing with Blake Lizotte was the center. So Dubois is a big upgrade there, and that lets you get more minutes too. If your minutes were being limited because you were playing with a centerman who couldn't handle them, here you go.
Yeah, so this will be very interesting, and yeah, it's very tricky to try to predict with Kings. Pierre-Luc Dubois, the reason why I wouldn't want to draft him so high is just there's only so much power play time to go around. There's only so many minutes to go around with 3 good lines. So yeah, I don't know who this helps and who this hurts. Victor Arvidsson got some top power play finally last year. Now it's another person that's going to be in his way. So maybe this is bad for Arvidsson, but maybe is it good for other reasons? Yeah, we'll have to see how everything shakes out. But LA does look pretty stacked. Well, I'm not a big fan of Cam Talbot. I feel for 1 year, $1 million, whatever. I would have preferred for them to keep Korpisalo, but probably they just couldn't afford him anyways. And we can talk about him soon, going to your Ottawa Senators. So I guess we'll see if Phoenix Copley can hold up, or if a Copley and Talbot tandem can be enough. But I think aside from that, LA looks pretty strong to me. I think they should definitely be a contender, maybe a good dark horse cup bet if you're into that. I'm sure the odds are pretty long.
I don't even know what a cut bet means.
Cup bet.
Oh, cup bet. Okay. All right. We don't need to leave that in the show. A good dark horse cup bet. Yeah. Well, in that wide open West, it's okay, well, do they stack up with Dallas? Yeah. If that top 9 works out, they very well could. And if Copley gives them the goaltending that they're hoping for, that could also be good. It's a big if, but I would have a little more faith or a fair amount more faith actually in Phoenix Copley being able to shoulder most of a load than Cam Talbot. Copley on the whole last season, like he had his ups and downs, right? He had a really strong run that put him on the radar, and then he struggled for most of the rest of the season. But he still played about his expected Fenwick save percentage was 929 roughly, and he put up a 933, so about 4 save points above his expected numbers at 5-on-5, which is great. And Cam Talbot actually played at expected for all the shade that I offer Cam Talbot. But what I'm realizing now is that these are the 5-on-5 numbers. Yeah. So at 5-on-5, Cam Talbot played 7 save points below his expected Fenwick save percentage, and Phoenix Copley played 7 save points above his expected Fenwick save percentage numbers. And I don't see any reason to expect that to flip. Like Cam Talbot for, basically the last 5 years has been underperforming his expected number after a few years. When he was started as a backup and then moved into a starter's role, overperformed it. But those days seem far enough behind me, or behind him and behind me, that I'm not going to put a whole lot of faith in Talbot now. I would assume that Copley gets at least a 60% share of the starts.
Yeah, there's also the fact that Talbot, I don't know if he could stay healthy all season. So yeah, I think this is probably good. It could be, it's definitely foreseeable that Talbot could be the starter next year. Like Copley's been a career backup / minor leaguer until last season. So like anything could happen here. It's very hard to predict goalies. If I had to bet though, I would say that Copley is I'm happy as someone who has Copley in my dynasty league. I'm definitely happy that they didn't trade for like Connor Hellebuck and instead they signed Cam Talbot. I think that's probably good news for his chances to get a lot of games with a team that looks like really good, like we've been discussing. Brian, okay, let's take another break. Let's talk about the other big trade, and we'll see how much more we can cover here. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. This has been a blast so far. All right, we are back. And Brian, yeah, the other big trade that I wanted to talk to you about is the Devils and the Flames. So New Jersey sent Sharon Govich and a third for Tyler Toffoli. They've made some other moves. Calgary's in like a rough spot right now, right? Like they've just traded away Toffoli for Sharon Govich, and no shade on Igor Sharon Govich, who like at times last year we talked about having some potential, but Toffoli was one of their best players, especially after Huberdeau kind of pooped the bed. Toffoli had 73 points. It's just such a strong season for him. Probably, yeah, like I said, like maybe was their best player, trading him away. Also, Calgary has Elias Lindholm, Mikael Backlund, and Noah Hannafin, all with just 1 year left on their contract before going to UFA. And apparently like they're all saying they want to be traded or aren't planning on signing. So I don't know exactly. I think Calgary fans might be getting ready for a rebuild of some sort here if all of their good players are going to be leaving, and they'll just have like Jonathan Huberdeau left at the end of the day, and I guess Nazem Kadri along with Sharon Govich. But anyways, let's look at the New Jersey side first, okay? Because like I said, they're getting Tyler Toffoli, 73-point guy, added to this insane top 6, right? They already have Jack Hughes. They have Timo Meier now, who also, by the way, got extended 8 years, 8.8, pretty much similar contract to PLD. So for fantasy wise, give me Timo Meier for sure. Maybe overall they're similar. I guess centers are important.
Overall, I think that's the difference. Like I'd prefer Timo Meier, but you do need centermen.
Yeah. All right. Jesper Bratt also got extended another 8 years. So like New Jersey's got their core set for a while. But yeah, so they've got Hughes, they've got Meier, they've got Hischier, they've got Bratt, they've got Toffoli. They have Dawson Mercer, who I don't know for fantasy next year. Like obviously with all this depth, like Mercer's probably not sniffing that top power play very often. But yeah, New Jersey obviously super stacked. They also for their D, like holy cow, they've got obviously Hamilton, and then they got Luke Hughes, who's probably going to play next year. Nemec is coming, so they're going to have like 3 amazing defensemen and like this incredible top 6. I guess it's just like LA, like a net is maybe a bit of a concern. I guess Vanacek is the guy next year. Blackwood is finally out of the picture. But let's start again. Now that I've sort of set the table here, Tyler Toffoli, how good can he be? Like, can he be a 73-point guy on such a stacked team? Or is it going to be like, there's only so many goals that can be scored. There's only too many people that can be touching the puck. Does he maybe like end up getting hurt just by being, but of course we also sometimes say how like when you play with good line mates, that's a good key to fantasy success. So what's your take on Tyler Toffoli? Will he be able to build on this career 73-point season that he just put up?
Yeah, and Toffoli's now, by the way, been a 70-point player for 2 of his last 3 seasons. All right. So like there's a lot to like about Tyler Toffoli and what he's been able to accomplish. And I should clarify, 70-point pace player in 2 of his last 3 seasons. But the key for him in both of those seasons was a big power play role, which he hasn't always been guaranteed. And I'm curious to see where he fits in to the power play in New Jersey, because my hunch is that he doesn't, Elon. Like assuming, and the Devils could totally pull a 2 even unit 50-50 situation. But I feel like teams, that's not their first choice anymore. I think they were experimenting with it and it didn't end up. And I can't think of too many teams who are still doing that. Like Vegas was doing it for a while. Toronto was doing it for a while. And it's not for lack of being able to load up. It's just, hey, we've got so much talent. We might as well spread it, get fresh legs on the ice. But I see in New Jersey, Hamilton QBing with Hughes, Bratt, Hischier, and I guess Timo Meier, right? Like, I hesitated on Timo Meier being the 4th just because you got to have people who are ready to shoot, right? But you can't have too many people who are ready to shoot. And this is another reason why Tyler Toffoli might not fit in on the top unit, because you've got Jack Hughes ready to fire away on, say, one side. You got Timo Meier ready to fire away on the other. And Tyler Toffoli, I don't think there's enough shots to share. Like that would be his strength on the power play. And I don't think he's going to really have a chance to do it with the Devils, which means that looking at his power play point totals, like in his most successful seasons have been 20 power play points or 25 power play points. I think he probably goes back to where he was for a lot of his time in LA, which was power play 2 production. 10 to 12 is the best case scenario you could hope for, which means that I think Toffoli goes back to being like not the 45-point player he was in LA, and which he only ever was because of the role he was asked to play there. But I think Toffoli might be a safer bet around the 60-point mark than assuming he'll repeat at the 70-point mark. I mean, the good news is he's on a super high octane New Jersey offense, but in Calgary last year, he had a career high almost 3.5 shots per game. And I don't know if there's going to be enough puck to go around for Toffoli to keep taking that many shots. The Devils have the puck a lot, but there's a lot of guys who like to shoot it. So we'll see how that plays out, but I'm not expecting this to be a positive fantasy impact for Tyler Toffoli. I'm going to guess that he trends closer to 60 than he does the 70.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine him like eclipsing what he did last year now that he's no longer like guaranteed to be on this like top line and top power play, getting like the best deployment. So yeah, it'll be tough, but like good for the Devils. But yeah, I think I would also be fading Toffoli a little bit. Obviously we'll see lines in training camp, but also I think this year I'm going to really take that lesson of like, don't read too much into it. Things can change quickly. And New Jersey was switching up lines a lot. Like maybe we'll see Dawson Mercer on the top power play and everyone will like rush to add him. And then maybe he'll be bumped to the 3rd line and 2nd power play before like a couple of games.
Yeah, and the positive for Mercer and Toffoli, because I assume Bratt and Hughes will continue to be a duo, and Meier and Hischier will be like a Swiss duo too. Mercer and Toffoli both, like we said this about Mercer last year, like as long as he's in the top 6, he's playing with a top flight centerman in either Hughes or Hischier, and same with Toffoli. So like even if he loses, even if he's not on power play 1 at 5-on-5, he should be well situated.
I mean, there is also Andre Palat, who sometimes got turns in the top 6. So I think that New Jersey has a lot of pieces to play with.
That signing's looking really like, what do you think Palat would have made if he was a free agent this offseason? Like he's signed for another 4 or is it 5 more years? He's a UFA in 2027 for $6 million.
I kind of agree with you. Like it makes sense what you're saying that like he wouldn't make as much, but then I see that his former teammate Alex Killorn just got 4 years.
Oh, that was
6.25.
That was bananas. That is one of the weirdest free agent signings. And like Palat at the time, I was like, oh yeah, this could work. Maybe he could be a top line center given the opportunity. And we saw he was barely
center, yeah.
Or sorry, winger or forward. Yeah. And Killorn, I have not had that thought about.
Yeah, Killorn has always been like a 50-ish, 40 to 50-ish point guy. And sometimes he would, get on the top power play on Tampa, which was one of the best places to be, or, get on line with Stamkos. And then he'd, pump an extra 15 points to his totals. That's what happened last year. But yeah, I think we don't have to hide our Anaheim takes. I think this one, well, I'll put it this way. I'm as excited about Alex Killorn this year as I was about Ryan Strome last year when they signed him.
Yeah, that's fair. I have a question for you, Elon.
Okay.
Just to go back to the Connor Bedard conversation at the
Ooh.
top, because like one thing in my brain I'm thinking about, like with Timo Meyer staying in New Jersey, was a bit of a relief to me because we've seen him there already, right?
Yeah, but
It's
we've
not
seen him there and he's not been great.
exactly. So I'm curious to know who you would draft first between Timo Meyer and Connor Bedard.
That's a really tricky one because I know you were like really saying how like actually Meyer's doing well and it's like, he's having bad luck, but he's like taking the right number of shots and he's having the right underlying metrics or whatever. So I guess I do trust Brian Calm, the fantasy hockey robot. I've done a podcast with you for 10 years. So if you say that Meyer was just as good as he was in San Jose, but just not getting the bounces, then that makes him a point per game, like 40 goal guy, 35 to 40 goal guy. Which, yeah, I think Bedard, I'd probably draft him as like what you said, like around a 70-ish point guy. So, and also I know Meyer's like great for shots. So I think I'll say Meyer, but I hope you're right. And it wasn't that he just like, I don't know, lost a step not being on the Sharks.
Yeah, well, it's also like New Jersey. There's a few teams that I like trust with their front office assessments, and like we're just finishing talking about Palat and how maybe they got that one wrong. But like sometimes I look at what teams do. I'm like, okay, well if New Jersey thinks that about a player, then I'm justified, or I need to change my thinking on them. Or Carolina, or Toronto would be another. Colorado. Like there's some teams that seem to be making well-informed decisions. So yeah, I'm gonna trust myself and the Devils on this one, and I would also draft Meyer first.
Yeah. And hey, like I don't think it's fair to necessarily say they got Palat wrong. Like they had a great season, right? They didn't get too far in the playoffs, but like I think the team overall was happy to have Palat from everything I've seen.
Yeah, I think if they had their druthers, Palat would be where Toffoli is in the depth chart.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk now about the goaltending, right? Because like I said, I think that is the one place in New Jersey where maybe there's a question mark. It's kind of like in LA. Like they have all of this firepower, but then are we going with Vitek Vanacek again? Last year, if you recall, also Akira Schmid came in and was looking pretty good. So if you're looking at the New Jersey situation, Vanacek, Schmid, and then we've got the LA situation of Copley and Talbot. Like, I don't know, how would you rank like those four goalies? Or like which goalie would you be looking to draft first in your fantasy league if you want to get probably, you could wait, like these are the types of value goals you want to try to take a swing on, then hope to get lucky on? Is there someone that jumps out at you as like the best bet to be a good goalie on a good team that will play some games?
I'll go Copley first. I think he's the most. I think both teams are going to be good, and I think Copley's the one who is most likely to see games and least likely to see a challenge. I think the question is, like, I thought you were going to ask me which Devils goalie I take first if I'm committing to one first in my draft, and I truly don't know.
I'd go Vanacek for what it's worth.
Schmid was better in less time, 12 save points above his expected number versus Vanacek, who's 5 save points above his expected number. And for me, like it's a big deal when a goalie loses starts in the playoffs. Like I don't know if I'm putting too much weight into that, but to me, that shows that like, hey, all bets are off now. Like if a team has lost enough faith in one goalie or gained enough faith in the other, that we are going, like that just shows that come game one of the regular season, anything can happen, and that the incumbent situation is thrown out, assuming that like it's all, like it all makes sense. There was a weird goalie thing. Now I'm gonna fail to remember it. Where like I thought it seemed like just like completely desperation. It didn't. Oh, was it Swayman and Allmark? I don't know. In any case, but didn't impact my thinking. But normally this is how I feel. And looking at playoff performance, Schmid played more games and played far, far better. Like Vanacek was terrible at 5-on-5 in the playoffs, and Schmid was excellent. So to me, that kind of tilts the scales a little bit towards Schmid. And I feel like Vanacek has already shown who he is, and Schmid hasn't yet. And I think I would roll the dice. Like if I were from New Jersey, I'd roll the dice on seeing if I do have something better than Vanacek, knowing that if I don't, I still do have Vanacek.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. Okay, I'm convinced. I'm convinced at least to say that I don't know what's gonna happen in New Jersey, so I'll also take Copley. But I can see all four of those guys being like a pretty even bet for like who's gonna end up having the most value in fantasy next year. On the Calgary side, I feel like there's almost like not that much to talk about. Like they have Igor Sharangovich, who is someone who sometimes we got excited because he would be playing with like a Jack Hughes or whatever, but overall he was just like a 30 points in 75 games guy. So clearly this was more of like I guess a cap dump, or I'm not sure exactly why Calgary, or I guess it's just because Toffoli wasn't going to resign anyways. They wanted to get something for him before he becomes a free agent. Is Calgary gonna stink next year? Like, is there? I guess we have to see what happens with Lindholm and Backlund and Hanifin, right? So maybe we can wait and like have a bigger conversation about Calgary later. I'll just tell you right now, Brian, my vibes right now aren't very good.
No, the vibes for Calgary are very bad. They're a team that I like reflexively would like to stay away from, but they're also a team that I'm going to remember as a new GM and a new head coach, and has a Jonathan Huberdeau and an Nazem Kadri both looking for love and redemption. So like I know Elias Lindholm wants out. We've heard everybody wants out except for their most recent acquisitions, right? Huberdeau and Kadri, who are both committed to the team for the better part of the next decade. So they should be pretty invested in making this go well, or, and then, I feel like if you're new in the team and the team's entering a rebuild, then maybe you're not motivated to play for the team, but you're motivated to play well enough to increase the amount of salary or decrease the amount of salary retention that your current team will need to take for you to get yourself out of there. But yeah, I'd be looking at a potential bounce back for both Huberdeau and Kadri. And I'm really curious to know where Huberdeau is going to go in mocks this season, just like how many people have given up entirely. I'm like, nope, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Because let me tell you, I'm interested. I'm interested in a Jonathan Huberdeau redemption season. There's not a whole lot to work with, especially if Lindholm does go out the door. Doesn't have a whole lot of company in Calgary to make this thing happen. But I feel like he's still got some. I feel like Huberdeau has a lot to prove. I think he has a front office that is extremely invested in making the most of their $10.5 million investment through to 2031. And I think it's a good moment for a clean start, fresh slate for Huberdeau. And I'm willing to give him another chance this year, not to be like a 90-point player, but I'm looking at him like I would take Bedard before Huberdeau if you're trying to figure out where exactly I slot Huberdeau in, but I'd start him around a 60-point pace because he's someone who I could draft around that part of the draft who has upside for a whole lot more.
Yeah, I don't like for sure. Like this is the kind of thing where we'll have to see maybe what Calgary does, who he has. Like he did end the season strong, Huberdeau, 15 points in his last 19 games. I'm seeing for whatever that's worth. I'm one of those people that's not that interested. Like obviously if he falls far enough, I'll take him. Like sure, he's going to get great deployment. You'd expect. Hopefully the new coach doesn't hate him as much as Sutter did. But yeah, I don't know. That's
I remember the goalie thing, by the way. The goalie, it was Boston, and Andy in the chat's helping me remember when they stopped rotating goalies all of a sudden in the postseason, the way they'd done all year. And then they put Swayman in game 7 for his first appearance in the season. And it wasn't necessarily because Allmark was terrible. But like something worked for you guys. So anyway, not much that I could take away from that. But most other playoff goaltending changes, I'll take something away from.
All right. So Brian, off air, do you want to end the show now or do you want to do a commercial break and do a couple more teams?
Your call.
Okay. Let's keep going then.
Okay.
I don't know. All right, Brian, let's take one more break and then we'll talk about another team with a brand new GM in just a sec. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right. We are back. Brian, are you able to guess what you probably guess? Can the listeners, have you been able to guess what's the other team with a new GM? Because it's the GM that's making the biggest splash, Kyle Dubas, right? The big name that switched from Toronto to Pittsburgh, and he has gotten to work tinkering with this Pittsburgh Penguins team to try to get something out of the Crosby, Malkin, Letang core before it's too late. And he's done quite a bit. Maybe people would say I waited too long to talk about them on this episode. Maybe they've been more significant than some of these other teams. But here we are. So first of all, he traded a third to get Riley Smith from Vegas, which is convenient because they've lost Jason Zucker. So right away, my question will be, actually, before I even go through the whole list here, let's just start right there. Is Riley Smith the new Jason Zucker? Can you just slot him in? He'll play out. Like if it's just going to be Crosby, Gensel, and who's it again on the top? Oh, and Clay and Rickard Rakell, or maybe sometimes Brian Rust. And then you'll have Malkin with Rust/Rakell, and then Riley Smith. Is it as simple as that?
I think so. I think that's it. I don't see
Okay.
any more to it, and I'll believe in Smith as much as I believed in Zucker, which is, yeah, like I believe they're talented players whose offense comes in bursts, and sometimes they go cold enough to drive you crazy, but then they go hot enough to make you really excited and regret having ever dropped them. So I feel like it's a very similar vibe with Riley Smith coming into. I agree, Elon. Essentially replace Jason Zucker.
Yeah, I mean, I think it works out pretty well. So Pittsburgh maintains that solid top six that they've had for a while. Of course, there's the rest. There's the bottom six, which has been a problem lately. They got Nola Chari. They've got Lars Eller. They got Matt Nieto. So we'll see if these like sort of depth guys are enough to sort of shore things up a little bit. Another big signing that Dubas made before getting to goaltending, which is of course the biggest one probably, but they signed Ryan Graves to a 6-year contract. So that should hopefully help the defense. I don't know, Brian, what's your take on Ryan Graves? There was that one year live in Colorado where like he was like really great for fantasy and he was getting like a lot of shots and points and he was great for peripherals. And then since then, when he went to New Jersey, he sort of just disappeared a little. But is he like forgetting about if he's going to have much fantasy value? Is Ryan Graves like a good defenseman who helps the team here? Like, do you think this is a good move by Dubas?
I think the jury's out. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Last year, he took a whole lot of penalties, which is like one thing that really shows up from a negative impact that he had on his own team. But Ryan Graves, on the whole, I think that what you'd hope for from him is being a steady and reliable top pair or at worst second pair defenseman. And like, yeah, it's a lot of term. You're committing 6 years to Ryan Graves, but at $4.5 million, there's not like a whole lot cheaper options out there for somebody who's a free agent and has upside to be that top pairing defenseman. We've seen it before. And I think for the majority of his career, Graves has been a solid defensive defenseman. And last year was a bit of a blip. And I would hope that he can recover. And I think that's what Kyle Dubas is betting on.
Yeah, and the Penguins have lost.
But you were also asking fantasy impact.
No, I wasn't. I assume
okay.
he's not.
Fantasy. Like... I mean, like it's the fact that I didn't talk about it is basically my take on Ryan Graves' fantasy impact in Pittsburgh.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, of course, you want to have good defensemen if you want to draft a goalie in fantasy and want to hope that the defense will be able to help him out a little bit. And Tristan Jarry last year, I don't know if it's he didn't get enough help or he just didn't do well with the help that he got. But Tristan Jarry had a terrible season last year. Actually, overall, it's a 909 save percentage. Doesn't even look so bad. But there were just some games where he was just getting totally destroyed, especially at the end of the year, which led to Pittsburgh not making the playoffs. So, but Pittsburgh decided to go back with him. And I guess Kyle Dubas looked at the other options in net and figured, you know what, let's just give Tristan Jarry a really big contract. And now he's locked in for 5 years, 5.375. I'm kind of surprised just because I thought the vibe around him, like the idea is that like he could be good, but he was like struggling with injuries. So I guess they're just hoping that hopefully they got a lot of doctors to go and check on him and confirm that he's back to 100%. In the past, Brian, Jarry has kind of been like a Matt Duchene for you, like one of these guys that you seem to be pretty high on. Are you taking the same tact as Dubas that we could kind of just disregard Jarry's bad year last year because he had some injuries and we can just go more based on his numbers beforehand, which were really strong, including a 919 save percentage a couple seasons ago in 58 games?
Sorry, just give me 1 sec. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Tristan Jarry.
I think Tristan Jarry could be just fine as a perfectly average goaltending option. And I think that's what you hope for. And you hope he plays above his head sometimes, especially going in with that $5+ million cap hit. Like, to my initial reaction to this is you are in the end of your Letang, Malkin, Crosby window. You've got 2 years to make this work, and you're committing almost $5.5 million to a goalie who hasn't played up to that value. And like, there's a lot to be said for somebody who the players know and like and trust if he's not a net negative, no pun intended. And Tristan Jarry hasn't been a net negative. He's been a net nothing like that. And that's good. All right. He's been average, but you just wonder if you might be able to moneyball that a bit better and get a little more out of him. And also, like we were talking about this on our Discord server when it happened, and Brendan, who's a Pens fan, always has really great and intelligent things to say too. Good comments, was like, well, it doesn't really matter that it's a long contract term because the window is really only in the next 1, 2, 3 years. But then if Jarry isn't working out at the same time, that extra, like that long tail on the contract makes it hard to move on from him if he's not working out. But I feel like Dubas did essentially what he did in Toronto with Frederik Andersen, which is like, we have our eye on a goalie. We think he's at least going to be average. There's upside for better. And so we're going to go ahead and make a bet so we don't have to twist ourselves in knots over what to do with it, which is also like a funny change from Dubas by necessity having to go with Samsonov and Matt Murray into last season, which almost worked for him, right? Or you could argue it did with Ilya Samsonov. So to me, it's interesting that he didn't, like, the lesson he's learned from his time in Toronto, or the move he wanted to make based on his experiences, was that he is going to invest heavily in a goalie who's been dicey at times, but overall reliable, rather than try and save some money at the position. But there you go. I think Tristan Jarry is going to continue to be, for fantasy, what he has been the last several years, which is overall frustrating. Although I do think Pittsburgh is going to win more games in 23-24 than they did in 22-23. And I think Tristan Jarry will be the beneficiary of that. And he still only has Casey DeSmith playing behind him for the moment. So I think that's all the more reason. Like, Tristan Jarry is still, like, carries a lot of fantasy value as being a goalie who you can really rely on to start a big, like one of the bigger workhorse goalies in the league.
Yeah, well, Brian, they do have some other goalies. I'm sure they're going to be goalies that you're going to say we shouldn't care about. But they did sign Nedeljkovic for 1 year, 1.5. And
You're right.
They also got my guy Hellberg, who took a stop in Ottawa last year. So Dubas said, like, he wanted to have like 4 goalies, like, just because injuries happen. So
I mean, well, that's from lived experience for Dubas too, right? And those are almost like his Samsonov and Murray signings. Nedeljkovic should be interesting. Like, I think he can definitely battle for the backup job out of camp, and there's a good chance he can win it. And if Jarry stumbles long enough, I would say Nedeljkovic is a bigger threat to Jarry's workload than DeSmith would be. So if you are drafting Jarry, I'd be watching to see how that training. But of course, like, things can change, as you said, Elon, really quickly. You don't want to make a whole bunch of bets based on just what's happening in training camp. But I take back a little bit about what I said. Tristan Jarry's workload is a little less guaranteed with Nedeljkovic, who I think could still have something to show. But I guess he's running out of opportunities to show it.
Yeah, we'll see if he makes the team next year, even, because DeSmith is, like, still signed to that contract. So that's Pittsburgh. And with goaltending, it's so hard to predict. They're going to go with Jarry, and it'll be fun to see. He'll still probably be someone that will rank decently high in Schmore goalies board, just because it's a starting goalie on a good-ish team. So you would think that he should have some value in fantasy, though I'd be curious to get your take on Jarry versus the goalie that the Sens decided to take a shot on. Really, there were only 2 goalies that got big contracts, like big long-term contracts. Actually, you know what? There's 3, but one of them is Semyon Varlamov, which makes no sense to me. I don't know why the Islanders gave Varlamov a 4-year contract when he's like 36 years old. That didn't seem especially necessary to me. But the Islanders really. Okay, can we just, like, for a second, like, the Islanders are a weird team. Like, Lou Lamoriello is a really weird GM. Like, why did he sign Varlamov for 4 years and then Scott Mayfield and Pierre Engvall each for 7 years? Like, and also, it's not as if this is like the core of a team that just won a cup, where it's like, well, these are our guys. They're like, they've been kind of meh. Now they're like just like sticking with these guys forever. I don't know. We don't have to dive into it right now. They extended Sorokin. That's good. But I just don't understand. That's the island.
That's the Lou way. He's going to thank you for your past performance by overcommitting to you significantly.
But what past performance? Like, with Engvall and Scott Mayfield. Like, there's not even much 7-year contracts. for guys who like, if they were UFA, I would have expected, well, they were UFA, right? Like I didn't even have them on my radar as like top 10, top 20 UFAs to teams we'll be looking at. So
Yeah,
crazy.
I guess I was just thinking it's like very much in line with the deals that Lou has given to Martin and Cizikas and Clutterbuck. It's almost like be a good soldier and you'll keep getting the things. But yes, 4 more years for Varlamov, who's 35 years old, by the way. That it's real interesting, especially since you probably like you're gonna play Ilya Sorokin at least 60 games. You can probably just handle having somebody else, like some random, like a Talbot at like 1x1 and then figure out the rest as you go.
Well, yeah, Talbot, like James Reimer went to Detroit for like 1 year, 1.5. Like, there's a lot of goalies that just signed for 1 year. I don't know. Anyway, Ottawa, anyways, has another long-term goalie locked in Joonas Korpisalo. So just like Jari, he got 5 years, $4 million per year. So a little bit less than Jari. But yeah, a big commitment. I'm curious what you think about this, Brian. I remember I asked you a bunch of times last year, like,
yeah, you called this.
I was like, which goalie do you want Ottawa to go for? And I was telling you a bunch of different UFAs. We knew they're going to have to get someone because they don't want Talbot back, and they weren't ready to, hand it over to their, prospects. It didn't work out so well last year. So now we've got Joonas Korpisalo, who at one point was really good. I still remember, Brian, that year when the Korpisalo and Merzlikins were both just like destroying it over in Columbus, and like one would get injured and the other would just like be the best goalie in the league, and then that one would get injured and the other goalie would become the best in the league for a bit. So that was a funny. But then after that, like, Korpisalo continued to struggle and struggle and struggle, and we came to the point where we were like, this guy's like barely an NHL goalie. I wonder if he's even going to stick around much longer. And then out of nowhere last year, Korpisalo just like leapfrog Merzlikins. Like I paid money for Merzlikins in my cupful auction.
Fake money.
Fake money. But yeah, like I a significant chunk thinking, okay, we got a volume starter on what I think could be a decent team. I was wrong on both accounts. Like Korpisalo was clearly better than Merzlikins. He ended up putting up like really good numbers. Then he got traded to LA, continued to put up great numbers. And yeah, so one good season for Korpisalo after a career of nothing. And now he's going to Ottawa, 5 years, $4 million a year. But that's the negative. The positive is that maybe he's figured things out. Maybe he had some injuries before that finally he's worked, because I know he has had some injury trouble. So if he's fully healthy, and if last year is representative, Korpisalo was like incredible last year, right? So I'm curious to know what's your take right now. And again, goalies aren't possible, but bottom line is this is a for sure starting goalie for the Sens, and probably worth drafting in fantasy for as long as he's healthy and not terrible. I'm just curious to see how long do you think that'll last?
Yeah, you could say for sure starting goalie, or you could say there's a chance he falters and gives up the net to Anton Forsberg, who like has shown that he can hold on to the net for a little bit. Like
I'm sorry, I forgot he was there still.
Yeah,
I was thinking of
still
Sogard.
there. And I think they were actually both teammates on Columbus as well. So like, yeah, Sogard's there. I think it's another development year. Forsberg is a UFA in 2 years from now. So, I don't think it's likely that Forsberg starts the year in outside the NHL. Of course, he did have like a pretty severe injury. Like, didn't he bust both his knees towards the end of the season last year, or at least one of them? So I don't know if or when he'll be healthy, but this is more about Korpisalo. And with a healthy Forsberg, I think Korpisalo might need to look over his shoulder, because Forsberg could steal starts if Korpisalo isn't what the Sens hope he is. And yeah, I guess like Korpisalo's had 2 great seasons in the league. One was his rookie season, which was also Connor McDavid's rookie season, where he was 12 save points above his expected number. And the other was this past season, where he was, I don't know, like I have to aggregate his Columbus and LA time on the fly here, but let's say 14 save points above his expected number. Like, those are big performances. The problem is that between his rookie season and this most recent one, Korpisalo had 6 seasons where he played below his expected Fenwick save percentage, and often like quite far below his number, like enough that Elon, I had written him off completely as somebody who had much of a future in the NHL. And I think man, like this now, sorry, now you're hearing the Ottawa Senators side of me, where it's like Ottawa has made so many bad bets on goalies. Like, even one year, like Talbot was a bad bet on goalies. Like, I'm going back to like Martin Gerber. That was a bad bet. Like, that was the first of many bad bets that Ottawa has made. And I just find it very curious. And they also traded Philip Gustafsson away. So it's like, hey, like your goalie scouting seems pretty bad. Seems like you don't really know what you're doing. And yet you are happy to commit above average cap hit in term to a UFA goalie who's coming off one good season after 6 bad ones. So Elon, like you said, hey, maybe there was an injury holding him back. Maybe he figured out something to change in his style. Maybe Korpisalo is improved. It'll be really interesting to see where things go for him from here in Ottawa. I think you're right. I think with the money they've invested in him, it's likely he's the starter. So at least that makes things a little bit clearer than Forsberg Talbot did going into last season for fantasy purposes, that you could lean on Korpisalo as being the likely game 1 starter and likely, 60-40 share. But there's still a really decent chance that Korpisalo can't actually hack it as a starter in the league. I'd be willing to take a late swing on him like you did on Merzlikins, but I wouldn't pay as much to do it as you did for Merzlikins.
Yeah, I think that you're not going to be able to get him that late. I'm not saying that it's wrong.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. No, I think a lot of folks are gonna go snap him up and think, well, especially with how great he was in the playoffs too. And I think that probably added 2 years of term and another $1 million to his contract, right? That's what teams are really pumped to see. Korpisalo
Tyler Bertuzzi was so great in the playoffs last year, and I'm sure Toronto saw that and was like, I want some of that. We suck in the playoffs.
Yeah. So anyway, you can hear that I have trust issues with Senators goaltending pro scouting. And amateur scouting. I have trust issues with Korpisalo. So we'll see if 2 wrongs make a right.
All right. So I'm assuming then if you're just drafting for 1 year next year in a non-cap league, like not worrying about the contract or anything, you're taking a Tristan Jarry ahead of Korpisalo?
Oh, that's a really good question. And yes, I am. I think, you know what? I think Jarry. Oh, that's a really good question. I think Korpisalo has the higher ceiling, right? Because if he is for real, he's on a team that will get, I would say, roughly a comparable number of wins to Pittsburgh, and be able to, if he's good, he'll see the same volume as Jarry. And if he's really good, like I've seen enough from Jarry to be like, yeah, I think it's unlikely he's going to have a really good season. Korpisalo could have a really good season, even though I've seen a lot from him. It's crazy, right? It's like a downside upside thing. So yeah, you know what? It depends how I'm feeling in my team about my team.
Okay.
In my draft. If I want to take the swing, I'd go with Korpisalo. If I want the safer bet, I'd go Jarry. I don't know. I think I'd try and take Korpisalo like a round or 2 after Jarry goes. I think that would be my move.
It sounds like maybe we're going to be putting them in a similar tier when we do Sport Goalies board.
What would you do?
Yeah, I think they're like similar bets, to be honest. And I think I'd probably go Jarry, though, because I think he even has some upside. Like Jarry's had like a 921 save percentage season and a 919 save percentage season. Like he has had some years where he has had numbers just as good as Korpisalo had last year. So I'd take Jarry, but I could see it going either way for sure. Very hard to say.
And you're right to look at like raw save percentage can help make those decisions too. Like I usually am, like, as a reminder, I'm just looking at 5-on-5 situations, which obscures whether a goalie was playing like really well on the penalty kill. Like that would be one way. That is one way that Tristan Jarry has upped his numbers in the past above what has been pedestrian 5-on-5 play.
Right. So there's more we could talk about with Ottawa, but we might as well wait. Apparently, Alex DeBrincat, that's really heating up the trade rumors. So maybe our next show will have a headline of an Alex DeBrincat trade to dive into. But Brian, I think that's enough for today. We've covered a lot. We still have a ton to get to. Here's a preview for the next episode whenever we get to it. Okay, we got like Arizona. We talked about how they traded for Sean Durzi. We have to talk about him for a long time. Jason Zucker, signed there. Actually, Arizona's got a lot of fun guys that we can talk about. Carolina has really shored up their defense, spent a lot of money short term on Orlov. They got Bunting. They're bringing the same goalies back. They're going to, maybe we'll also be able to have a D'Angelo trade to talk about. Washington's Pacioretty signing will be fun to discuss. Killorn to Anaheim. I'll just give some highlights here. I don't know. We already talked about Boston. I have them next on the list here. Talked about the Islanders. Wheeler to the Rangers should be pretty interesting. Kevin Hayes to St. Louis. We got a lot of stuff.
I can't wait.
These past few days.
I'm chomping at the bit to get to these guys. So
Duclair traded to the Sharks.
We're going to schedule another episode really soon where we can really dig in and not just name all the things that have happened.
All right. Well, I just wanted to give a little preview, but I guess everyone knows what's been going on. Oh, Connor Brown to the Oilers could be really huge, by the way. I'll throw it out there right now. Connor Brown could be actually the guy whose fantasy value has gone up the most because he could play. Just like how we talked about Drouin played with McKinnon, Connor Brown played with McDavid in junior, believe it or not. But okay. Brian, with that, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this mega episode where we talked about as many of the things as we could. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Should I even say that still? Twitter's driving me crazy. I'm refreshing my tweet deck right now, and I still can't see any of my feeds except for just one of them. Very frustrating. I'm running this like site, with Shams, and we like retweet things, and it's making it very challenging. I don't know why they have to do this to me. Twitter used to be pretty good, I thought, for hockey. Anyways, but yeah. Follow us at Keeping Karlsson. If you want to support the show, you can become a patron. We currently have our $1 promotion going on right now for the summer. So you can get all of our perks, join our community on Discord. We have a lot of fun over there. Register for the cupful. So that's all at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. We'll take a 5-star review if you want to throw that to us on Apple Podcasts. I know that we haven't done too many shows lately, but I think Brian and I are ready to get back into it soon. We've had some busy personal lives going on, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to podcasting, and for sure, once it's crunch time and it's September, whatever, then that's when we'll be diving in, getting you ready for your fantasy season, and then going weekly with the short shifts and everything. And we got big plans for the feed for next year, and we really hope you'll be subscribed. Oh yeah, that's another thing I could ask you to do: subscribe to the podcast. Okay, I've just been blabbering for a while, so with that, I'm going to cue the outro music. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and read the credits because Brian has actually stepped away at the moment. But yeah, this episode of Keeping Karlsson is presented by Dobber Hockey and supported by our patrons, including our super supporters, Aaron, Ivan, Andrea, who's doing a great job running the polls. Also, over on our Discord, man, Andrea's done so much for us. Okay, Zach, Tom, Derek, David, Rob, Ricard, and of course, our first ever patron, Patty. The Ricard was pretty early as well. Some of these people were. But anyways, yeah. So thanks so much to the super supporters. Thanks so much to Shams for all the great work retweeting everything over on Game Day Tweets. Make sure to follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day News, NHL. Well, I guess Game Day Lines and Game Day Goalies you don't have to follow right now. But yeah, Game Day News NHL is really the place where you're finding everything with all these signings, and or you could just go to gamedaytweets.com to see everything going on without having to go on Twitter, where you're going to be rate limited apparently. Logo art by brandonweeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. Brian already mentioned a bunch of the websites he loves, but I'll say them again: Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, hockeygoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge. Get this out of it. That site doesn't even exist anymore. The other ones do. And yeah, thanks so much again for listening. Until next time, where we're going to cover maybe in one episode or maybe 2 episodes, we'll cover the rest of all the signings and trades. Just do your best to make sure, as you're starting to get your league started and your draft scheduled, try to make it that fantasy hockey is for everyone. Thanks. See ya. All right. Brian is not here. Thanks, Andy. Anyone else who watched live or watched afterwards on YouTube? But I guess I'm going to go. So hope everything's okay with Brian. Oh, he messaged me. All right. Anyway, yeah, I'll say goodbye. See ya.